The sloppy middle. What is a sloppy middle? Well, when you are in the middle of the story, it's either the story is progressing really well, or maybe you're finally actually getting to the meat of things. Now, the middle can take many different turns and directions, but it can be sloppy. The middle of the story is where some inconsistencies can be more noticeable. And that's why the middle is just like, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just okay. It's okay to have okay middles, sure. Because the middle is meant to have that in between from what happened at the beginning of the story of what stakes are at stake to the end of the story where the climax is and how the story finishes. The middle is like this little area that we like to call the sloppy middle. Because the author can be adding some random things in the middle to make it juicy enough so the reader can keep going to get towards the end. I'm here to tell you, the middle is not the easiest part to write. And why not? Why isn't the middle the easiest part to write? Well, you're in the middle, you're stuck in the middle of nowhere. And the middle, you're really trying to figure out which way to go. Because though you know where the story is taking you, the middle is all where the action is taking place. And you gotta make it enticing enough so we can move forward, not backwards. And from personal experience, I had some trouble with the middle of the story. It felt a little sloppy. And while I was writing my novel, I was constantly stuck in the middle. And it sucked. It really sucked. Because I was trying to find what else can I put in there that could connect to the main conflict that is going on in the story without it feeling like some type of filler. And one thing about the middle that you want to avoid is filler. You do not want filler to get involved in your story. You want as little filler as possible. With the middle, you don't want to be on the nose, because if you're on the nose, then the readers are going to figure out the end of your story. And you don't want that. That is the last thing you actually want for your story. And if you want your readers to keep going and try to figure out, you gotta keep giving them questions than answers. And I want to talk about that because really quick. So with the beginning of the story, you're starting to have questions and you're trying to find the answers. That's what the middle should start to be doing. But you don't want to give all the answers. Instead, with those answers, come up with some following questions. So by the end of the story, hopefully, most of the questions are answered. And whatever questions that are not answered by the end, hopefully they're more minor ones, that is left to the reader's imagination. So, how come the middle is so sloppy? Because there are so many ways that you can do it wrong. So many ways. And one example was through the question and answers. Another way you could do it is, okay, you could have the main plot solved by the middle of the book. absolutely wrong. So, having your plot, okay, you have the beginning of the story, this big, big, big event that's happening. And by the middle of your story, that is resolved. Then what does that leave for the end of the story? Pretty much nothing. And that's not what we want. Instead, still have your main conflict in the beginning, but you work yourself that connects, like little plot lines that connects to the main plot line that leads to the end of the story, and we're not stuck in the middle. And maybe you can have some conflicts that are solved in the middle, like certain characters reconciling with one another, or maybe something that's important to the plot has been resolved, but the main premise isn't. So when it comes to the middle, let yourself be cautious, because you can take it way too far. And the middle is rather sloppy because, well, it's like you go up and down, up and down, and up and down. And I guess a misunderstanding about the middle is that you just need more story to it. Well, is it the story that you've been building up to from the beginning enough? And I know it depends on the story, but a lot of times when you are getting to that middle of the book, you want to make sure everything comes together, starts to come together, and gets its way towards where the problem needs to be solved, or towards a certain conclusion. The middle is the meat of your book. And I guess I'll give you an example. So, example, you see Fearless? Fearless, great example. I bet the meat of the book is somewhere around the 300, 400 area. That's how chunky it is. But that's your meat of the story of what is happening, let's just say. The beginning and end are your buns. And everything else that you put in there, like the lettuce, tomatoes, the cheese, is everything else in between. But your meat is the middle, where you want to start really getting somewhere closer to the end. So by the end of the hamburger, hopefully you feel satisfied. And that's what the middle is supposed to do. The middle of the story is supposed to begin your way to the full satisfying end. And what happens if you don't do that? Well, good chance someone can drop the book and never return to it. And I think when it comes to the middle, that is one of the worst times you want a reader to drop your book. I'll give you the top 3. Very beginning, first chapter, the middle, and number 3, pretty much the last 20 to 30 pages. But the middle, in my opinion, would be the worst. Why? Because you're getting into things, and if you drop the book, you're never going to know how the book ends. And every time we pick up a book, we're curious of how the story ends. Well, it's cheating if you try to look at if you read the last page, you're like, oh, that's how it ended. That's spoilers and cheating. We don't want to cheat. We want to actually get from beginning, middle, and end. And if we stop in the middle, we're just going to have a open-ended discussion about what we read up to the middle. and that's not what we want. When it comes to my middle and a middle, okay, so the middle in a trilogy, I give you a great example with the Hunger Games. So this is great. And we get to exclude the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, because that's my least favorite. Okay, so we have the 3 Hunger Games books, the original Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay. So, the Hunger Games is the first book that introduces us to the Hunger Games. Yeah, we do have a ending there, but it continues with Catching Fire. So Catching Fire is the middle of the Hunger Games series. It is giving us more information about the conflict that is going on, which is the districts rebelling against the capital. And we get a good idea of that, and that the events that are in Catching Fire leads to the events that are in Mockingjay, that is to dethrone the government. Panem, which is President Snow, and they want to abolish the Hunger Games. Exactly. Yes, I know. Is that something? And that is just a brief, very, very brief something. And a lot of times, the second book does lead into the third book. But some trilogies or some books that has a middle book are just filler. And what you want to avoid with the middle book is it becoming filler. There's ways that the middle book can become filler. Just more into it to lead to the end. It's more common for the middle book to be filler in trilogies. And like I said, we want to avoid that. Each book needs to play a pivotal role that connects everything or most things to the main plot. So by the third or last book of the series, we understand what the previous books were trying to tell us, especially the middle, so that we might read a satisfying end. I wish I had an example of a middle book that was just filler. I wish I knew that example, but I don't know. But usually, middle books are a favorite of mine personally. Hunger Games is quite the exception because I love the first book. But I guess that gets into middle book syndrome, what I was kind of talking about. And I guess I'll slightly mention about middle book syndrome. Middle book syndrome, like I said, it can be done well or wrong, but it's that the middle between that first book and that last book, or however many books in between. But that middle book is there to divide the gap between what happened before and what's going to happen after. And the middle book is usually used as filler in order to us to get to the end of from our main point from the beginning. But you want to make sure both or all the books leading up to the middle as well, leading up to the end, connects with all the things that were being said or executed in the book to lead to a satisfying end. That's middle book syndrome. And yeah, my biggest thing about middle books, I do have a series in the works, Mermaid Mysteries. When it comes to my middle book, I'll say that's actually my favorite book in the Mermaid Mystery series. I dive deeper into themes that I I go over like a good amount, but the second book allowed me to go even more deeper into it, and it feels so much more serious. And I'll tell you, the second book's better than the first, but the first book is amazing. Planning to publish in the coming months, by the way. And yeah, the middle book, like it's not filler at all. One thing it does have is a time jump. So yeah, like a 7-year time jump. Isn't that fun for a middle book? Um, let's see what else. Let's see. The villain. Oh, the villain's so interesting. I just include so many different things that makes the second book my favorite, and that's definitely not filler. So yeah. But my biggest advice when it comes to writing a middle book, just don't make it filler for the sake of getting to the end, or oh, I made it 3 books just because. The real thing isn't until the third book. The first gets started, the second just says whatever, and the third just gets to the main point. No, 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 no. That will defeat the purpose of the trilogy, or however many books it tells to get to the end. But yes, please, please don't have a sloppy middle.